So film is not dead. Many people think it is. Because of what I've termed the analog renaissance, more and more people, traditional filmmakers like Spielberg and Tarantino and Abrams, Scorsese, who have always used film, have used it, but more and more young directors want to use it now. And we're not the only part of this analog renaissance. Vinyl. If you look at the resurgence of people who want to use and listen to music with vinyl, the maker movement, 3D printing. In schools around the world, people are often schools are putting back in wood shops for creative use. So there is something bigger going on here. I think it's partly digital fatigue. We spend so much time with this device, or larger parts of this device, that people want something more real. And let's also remember something about analog versus digital. We are analog. So there's an incredible passion for film. Christopher Nolan is probably the best filmmaker that articulates that on a consistent basis, but Spielberg and others often speak about it. But I want to share a few quotes with you. So most people wouldn't think of Judd Apatow, who makes great comedy, as being necessarily a skilled filmmaker. And he believes in choice, as you can see from the quote. But the look is very important to him. And I was talking to one of his competitors, I won't name the name, but another very well-known maker of comedies who uses digital, and says, this is probably the biggest mistake I made. Judd doesn't write things that are more funny than I do. But when you watch his movies, it feels so much different, and part of that's film. So JJ, one little inside story on J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams' first job was when he was 16 years old, and he was hired to go archive and coordinate Steven Spielberg's films. So Spielberg, as a kid, used Super 8 like everyone else, and J.J. went to those. J.J. was asked to go do that as he was going around Hollywood, his first job. So it was incredibly interesting that at the last Star Wars was shot by J.J. Abrams, full circle, from touching Spielberg Super 8s all the way up. And as you can see, it feels incredibly important about film being part of the whole movie experience. So one of the people I deal with a lot, I deal with the head of the studios quite a bit, and Kevin Chuzahara is a real leader. And what he's referring to here when he says, in an industry where we very rarely have unanimity, everyone has rallied around keeping film as an option for the foreseeable future. And what he's talking about was an incredible coalition that happened a couple years ago when the last film factory that existed, that Kodak ran, was about to shut down if we didn't get a group of people who made a commitment that they would stay with film. And believe it or not, we got all 6 major studios to agree that they would support film. And Kevin was a leader in that. And the word that's the scariest one there for the artists in the room is foreseeable. Because one of the things that we really want to do in this analog renaissance is see growth in film. And this last year we saw a modest growth, but nothing like that vinyl kickback that you're seeing. So I'm going to talk a little bit later today, and obviously we'll take questions about what things that we as a film community can do to make sure it remains an option for people down the road. So just a reminder, Kodak's been doing this for a while. Since the Academy first ceremony in 1929, nearly all of the Oscar-winning movies have been created on Kodak film. And Kodak has also won 9 Oscars for scientific achievement and others, and other areas. So the largest number of Oscars of any company other than a studio. And so we're very proud that we not only support film, we continue to make it stronger and better. Now I gotta make some sales for you. So we need you to go see these movies that are shot on Kodak film. La La Land, I mentioned, Silence by Scorsese, Fences by Denzel Washington, Jackie, as you can see, by Pablo Larraín, Loving by Jeff Nichols. And that was an experiment we did as well. That was the first in a century. It was the first film that Kodak was a producer in. So we felt so strongly about that film and the importance that it was made on film that we were willing to put our own money to support filmmakers. And now we've done that about a dozen more times, particularly for young filmmakers. Nocturnal Animals, The Girl on the Train, Magnificent Seven. And for those who followed Westworld this year, also shot on Kodak film. Does everyone like Westworld? Yeah. All right. And for those, I got to do one more. If with that one, you got to do one more. Who likes The Walking Dead? Super 16. So there's some real advantages to film as well. Just a technical primer for you. Film technology encompasses 5 to 10 times more information than the best digital camera. When you get up to 70, for anyone who saw something on an IMAX or saw, for example, Hateful Eight, or who's going to go see Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan, on 70, you by then are almost 50 times as much information as the best digital camera. So it's just an incredible different feel. But also, more importantly, the chemical reactions, which is the grains and the gradation and so forth, just makes it a very different process. And again, it's not, I realize I take more digital videos than I shoot on film, so I can't criticize people who do that. However, when they invented acrylic paint, they didn't say oil paint had to go away. So let's keep the choice there. So we're working with film schools to encourage them to teach about film. We're offering scholarships. We're supporting film education, and we'd like to be able to do that here in Dubai as well. So one other small thing to think about. This is one, interestingly, that you really get a lot of discussions with the major filmmakers. This is a passionate thing for Coppola, passionate thing for Spielberg and Tarantino as well. If you're going to keep your piece of art for the future, for the next generation to see your work, you have to archive it on film, even if it's digital. So Vin Cerf, who's the chief technologist at Google, has come up with a term called bit rot. Remember, bits is part of digital. And it's the reality that the technology changes so fast that over time, people won't pay to upgrade it each time to each successive technology, and those former technologies will go away. It's already happened. You know, again, as I mentioned, Christopher Nolan. For those who liked some of his early work, like Memento and others, you know, he's worked on film exclusively for his whole life, except for a couple projects he did at film school on digital, and those are lost forever because the format's not there anymore. I have a 7-year-old son. I videoed his birth with a flip camera. Remember those things? I think Cisco bought it for $1 billion, shut it down 9 months later. It was the first cloud storage of video. When they shut it down, they give 30 days for everyone to take their memories back. And less than 1% of people did. So 99% of everything shot on that device went away if you hadn't separately downloaded it or uploaded it to YouTube. That happens. But on film, because it's readable And you can archive it, and in proper storage, it can last between 100 and 500 years. And that's why it's very important that the archival world continues to have film. And the only reason I make it as a point is if Kodak closes the film factory because we can't make enough film, we also have to close the archival part because it's the same line. And then we lose one of the most, the only, in our view, and by the way, the Library of Congress's view, and the Academy's scientific view, the only real way to keep film over generations. So one of the more bold things that we did is we decided we're going to come out with a new Super 8 camera. First new Super 8 camera in about 25 years. We announced it at CES last year. It was enormous response, positive response. And it scared us because now we said, now we have to go build it. For those who've been to CES, it's a lot of future stuff. And so I'm pleased to tell you that by March or April, just about 5 months from now, you'll be able to buy this camera. And we're going to be making sure that it gets into schools and photo and film stores so people can rent it as well as buy it. And this should be the opportunity for a new generation of filmmakers to participate with film. Because today, let's be honest, if you're going to really shoot film and you're not kind of an artist, you're a pretty established player in the film market. Very few people are learning film unless they have a huge passion for it. And this, we hope, can democratize film again. Just a little reminder, just give you a sense of how, you might say, well, if Kodak shuts the factory down, why wouldn't someone else open it up, or start it again? It just doesn't work that way. The film factory at Kodak uses a roll-to-roll process. Roll-to-roll manufacturing is kind of this amazing manufacturing, almost lost art. Very few things are done, steel is done that way, aluminum's done that way, but you need a lot of volume to do roll-to-roll. And you can't really do motion picture film any other way. It's a very, very difficult and high-quality product. You can imagine, when they were filming Lawrence of Arabia, 60 years ago or 50 years ago, and they had, literally thousands of people out in the desert, and they started shooting big scenes. If that film and that camera wasn't perfect quality, that would have cost them a lot of money. Very rarely has it happened to even any director who's been shooting their whole life where they actually lose a shoot. The film quality is that good, and that's just not replicable at low scale. So what I'm saying is, for us to keep the film factory alive, we have to have enough volume that allows us to do this roll-to-roll process, and that encompasses about 4 million square feet of space. So think of a factory about the size of the Empire State Building in New York City. It's not vertical, it's sideways, but that is what it takes to make 1 foot of film. Now, fortunately, we can make enough film to go many times around the moon in that same factory, but you need that process to go. So it is quite a responsibility to be the last maker of an artistic medium, and one that is so fixed cost based. So enough about film until Q&A. So we are also into digital, and a reminder, Kodak did invent the digital camera. It's usually a case study on how a company fails. Kodak invented the digital camera and then didn't exploit it. But we aren't anti-digital, and in fact, I want to announce, it was announced in London last week, a new product. Kodak is coming out with a smartphone. It's available in London today. It'll be available here about April. You can get it in Heathrow if you just want to go for a quick trip. And it's a fantastic phone. I am so tired of this device and the Samsung one that catches on fire. There's no longer innovation. This camera, which happens to have all the phone features of this device has a 21 megapixel versus 11. Okay, so you can get almost twice the camera. It's got a deca versus a quad in terms of processing, so it goes so much faster when you're flipping through and when you're looking at things. And it's got some fun stuff for people who actually like photography but happen to have a phone in their pocket rather than a camera. It's got the DSLR capability. It's got the ability to emulate Kodachrome, emulate Ektachrome, on the video, emulate Super 8. It's got a very easy process to print. And it's got an ecosystem around it for making sure your pictures stay in the cloud or backup. And so hope you buy one. It's also $100 less than this thing. So we've got one in the back. Where are you? Here it is. It's also got a very cool case because most of the girls I see, they carry it like this. And, you know, not the most masculine thing in the world, but I'll do it anyway. Yeah, that's a better way to carry your phone. All right, last slide, and then we can do some Q&A. This guy's George Eastman. He founded Kodak in 1888 and was an incredible, innovative guy. And when you're I think I'm the 8th CEO of Eastman Kodak over a century, you feel a lot of responsibility towards your founder. Turns out that he was born, 3 miles from where I grew up in upstate New York. Didn't know that until took the job. But he's one of the guys that we don't think about when we think of Carnegie and Rockefeller and Jobs now and some of the great entrepreneurs of the time. But he had a really simple message when he built his products. You push the button, we'll do the rest. And that democratized photography from 1888 till about 1920. He also had, and it's very apt we say this here in Dubai, probably the most globally, internationally sophisticated part of this world. I mean, you look at the diversity in that this place brings, the geographic investment for internationalization. But he thought globally. So Kodak is said, he invented the word Kodak, thought K was a strong color, and he thought around about it a lot. But one of the things he knew is that Kodak is said the same way in every language. Very few words are. So for Hewlett-Packard, they're HP. For those who've been to France, that's HP. Kodak is Kodak is Kodak is Kodak. And so he thought globally. And when he built his set of principles around simplicity. You push the button, we'll do the rest. And the other thing he really did, which is pioneering, he was one of the first major advertisers in the world. The first one to globally advertisers in the world. So we need to think about that as we each build our own business. But I always think a lot about the responsibility that I have when I try to keep this company going. And I'm glad, I think he'd be happy that film, the product that he popularized, is still going to be a part of Kodak. So with that, would love to take any questions you have. Talk about film.
Hi, Jeff. Hi. My name is Khan. I'm a cinematographer based in Dubai. I feel, in a way, privileged to have learned film by practice because I went to film school in LA at Columbia College. I have a BF in cinematography. So I started shooting movies when digital cameras were just on their way in. And we had like this, and there is a question, but I want to preface that with something. So we had like this digital camera at school, at film school, and everyone was shooting with this camera, and pretty much what you see is what you get. So I was pretty confident in my first 3 months at film school as a budding cinematographer. And then my teacher handed me this can of film, and it's like, hey, let's try shooting with this. And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. And I shoot with it, and everything comes out overexposed. And that's when I realized that I have a lot to learn. So I spent the next 4 years shooting exclusively on Kodak, thanks to Gail Duncan, who gave me a couple of grants. Now, I moved back to Dubai. This is where I was born and raised, about 4 years ago. And I've been working as a cinematographer. But I have shot 0 projects on film. And that's not necessarily because film has not been available, but it's because labs are not around or they have closed down. So there is the processing, there is the telecine. The cost comes afterwards, it's the availability and the access to these tools. So again, you mentioned earlier that you would be collaborating with schools here, but I think it's also important for working professionals in the region to have access to Kodak, because when I've even stopped mentioning film 3 years ago, and I get my kicks shooting on films in Europe or back in the States. But yeah, are there any plans for cinematographers and directors interested in shooting on film professionally? Thank you.
Great questions. So let me address that in a couple ways. First of all, let's talk about the ecosystem, because digital has an ecosystem. There's a series of software makers, and there's post-production. You have to rent your cameras. You have to keep up to speed on the cameras and the version levels. But Kodak's ecosystem is very physical, right? You have to get the film, and then you have to have it processed. In many cases, you need your dailies as well. So when we made the decision to keep film, the first meeting I had, even before meeting with the studios, was with the largest lab in the world called Photochem. Now, Photochem processes most of the Hollywood film-based movies, and they are very committed to film, and we're lucky with that. But Kodak lost, and the film industry lost, I'm going to start with the US, and then we'll go around the world. We lost a lot, particularly in television and documentaries and independent movies, when Deluxe closed in New York. So we realized that you can't have a vibrant film business around the world without labs. And Kodak historically has always been separate. It never wanted to compete with its ecosystem. So we made film. Hollywood studios used that film to make movies, and labs processed. And the fact is, the labs can't do it anymore. So Kodak now owns a film in New York. We bought a film in London, a lab in New York. We bought a lab in London called iDailies to support Cinelabs, which is a private but very close collaborator of ours. I was in Australia 3 weeks ago trying to negotiate for a lab to be built there. I was in Hong Kong, and I believe we have an agreement to build a lab there. We need to get another lab better capitalized in India. And of course, we need a lab here in the Middle East. And so that's the dialogue. Christian Richter here, where are you? He spends a lot of his time just trying to solve that problem. In terms of the other part, you talked about, do we have programs for young directors and cinematographers? And the answer is absolutely yes. We'd love to do what we're calling the Kodak Film Package, or sometimes it's called the Kodak Production Package, where we work with the institutions around the world, primarily Panavision that rents cameras. We work with the labs, we work with film, and we try to give you a price for all 3 services at once, particularly for independent filmmakers. And we try to do that in a way that it is very competitive to the alternatives. And then the last part, you obviously talked about, you got to get back in the schools. Because if you've been shooting digitally your whole life, it's going to be hard to try film, although you'd be surprised how many want to try it. Next question.
Hi, over here. Hi, thank you for your talk. I'm an artist, and I love to spend a lot of time watching films in cinemas. And my question to you is, what's the role of cinemas projecting movies on film? The time I spend when I travel, I go to films and cinemas in London and in New York, whether it's repertory cinema, and there's still screening films on projector, and the experience is just completely different. And although a lot of films that are made on using film, but digitized for the cinemas, and there's no, I think, projectors in Dubai. I don't know if any exist. And I'm curious to know what is the relationship between Kodak, your company, and cinemas besides the USA, abroad. Are there discussions here? I mean, because cinemas quickly replaced projectors because everyone wanted to digitize.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So projection, for nearly all of the motion picture film business, whether it was at the time Fuji or Agfa or Kodak, now it's only Kodak in motion picture film, but the most profitable part of the business was making prints and having those prints go out into the theaters. That's obviously collapsed in a major way. I agree with you. I think the feel of watching the flicker, hearing the noise, seeing that vibrant color is completely different. And that was why Tarantino insisted on Hateful Eight having a theater experience and released the movie earlier. So what are we doing? So one, we're working with filmmakers who believe that. And these are artists who choose their medium and want their medium shown the way they intended. And let me give you an analogy that Tacit Adine, who is a film artist, she had an incredible exhibition about 6 years ago at the Tate in London. She said, no exhibition place, be it a museum or a theater, should ever do anything other than what the artist intended. And she said, can you imagine going to the Louvre and rather than seeing the Mona Lisa, you saw a poster? You know, that's what Tarantino feels. And he's very articulate about this when someone watches his stuff on digital. He wants them to see it on film. That's why he made it that way. And when he and I talk a lot, and when Quentin says, you know, very seriously said, if you stop making film, I'm moving to a different medium. I'm going to do graphic novels and theater. He said, I'm not going that other way. So these are artists who feel deeply about it. So what are we doing? So we're trying to work with artists who can support it, particularly big ones, who can support doing that. And we've asked them to make it a different experience. To either use, in some cases, a different cut. Quentin used different cuts for those who saw Hateful Eight at the theater versus saw it on later on DCPs. So that's one. And I think we'll do something with Nolan around Dunkirk around this as well, even if it's just an early release. And so people who want to see it can see it that way. But it's bigger than that. Now, there are places around the world that are popping up now, Picture House in London, Alamo Draft House in the United States, that have become, and there are only about 10 franchises of each, but they are passionate and only show film. And I would think that each major city in the world should have at least one projection house. So we're in negotiations with the major theater chains, and we're trying, in the case of a multiplex, we're trying to get them to commit to one. And we're willing to fund it and co-brand it with them. Part of that's training projectionists again, so there's a little bit more work behind it than you might think. But we're also, and you'll see this, you're going to see Kodak over time starting to buy up independent theaters and branding them Kodak and trying to do that. And it doesn't work that well in the Mideast, but many of you are traveling in. There is an app we now have called Kodak Reel Film, REEL Film, and you can just load it down, and it will wherever you are in the world, you hit a button, it'll show you where film is being projected. So if you're in London, LA, Paris, wherever you live, you hit a button, you'll say, oh, hey, this is showing tonight, and it's projected on film. So that's what we're trying to do. We need to do more.
Hi, Jeff. Firstly, I want to thank you for fighting the corner of something that's dying. I remember reading an article a few years ago, I think, when you talking about how Kodak was pretty much done. And I felt bad about that. But coming down to brass tacks, I mean, we've spoken a lot about the nostalgia and emotion behind Kodak and how it's trying to diversify to stay alive. But if we're being honest, all of these boil down to numbers. Are we seeing are we seeing a year-on-year growth of the uptake in film enough that the people at Kodak and the board are all like, you know what, this is going to keep going? Or do you have a finite number of years? Do you have a deadline to turn this around for critical uptake before we're back to, okay guys, it's time to shut shop?
So every CEO has a limited number of quarters. Years, that's quite a luxury. The answer is we've got very strong commitment to it. So to be very specific, in the last year, motion picture film has grown from 40 million to 40 million. Now, origination's up about 30%, but print continues to go down. And that's kind of the last piece. There's a bad term in American corporate world, they call it the dead cat bounce. Has anyone ever heard that one? That's when something goes down really fast, and then you're lucky. Sometimes it bounces back, but never as high as it was when it was up in the tree. So we think we've got a dead cat bounce on print. And so we're projecting for the next year for it to go from about 40 to 48, and we've got a pipeline that looks like that. And Christian, that you just got your targets there. But the answer is because we're investing in other things, and this is kind of exciting for those corporate people who like to make things work. Film is this magical substrate that you see film, when you watch it on a theater or you put it in your camera or maybe a still photography. You also see it in some medical things around X-rays in some cases. Some still a little less than half, but still market. But we are now printing. Film is really multidimensional. We talk about 3D printing. Film is multidimensional, and it is effectively printed. So we have come out with things like touchscreen sensors that go into products like this based on film, as opposed to other semiconductor and other pieces. So the answer is motion picture film is $40 million of a $200 million film revenue base. And while it gets a lot more publicity because it's much more consumer centric, we have enough scale at this stage that I can continue to invest in it. And those investments need to pay off or else everything gets revisited. In the back.
Hey, since you are here, like in Dubai Film Festival that focused in Arab cinema, independent Arab cinema, so I don't know if you have an idea about the budget here for this kind of movies. It's like, maximum $500,000, like this is the rich film. So we are playing in $300,000 and $400,000, which is in digital. So if I'm going to my producer and say like I want to shoot in film, I think he will shoot me, So I don't know. Are you considering that? Are you considering how something to really make the independent films in Arab world or in Arab region make the film their film like our films in cinema film, and considering sure that really we don't have that kind of funds. Like now I got fund for my feature film and I'm still waiting for 70% to bring it from where I don't know. So how I can really think about doing my film in Kodak, that's what really I need to do.
So the best answer I can give you is I can connect you or anyone here with 4 or 5 filmmakers who have made really good films, and they've done it all within budgets of movies in the kind of 300,000, 400,000. So they're fitting film into their entire budget and still doing, reasonably low level. And these are great filmmakers. J.T. Molnar, for example. I don't know if you guys like really, really violent westerns. J.T. Molnar's your man. And so there are a lot of people out there that are using film and they've found a way to do it. And the answer is discipline. And I think this is really important. people don't, and we have line producers here? Thank goodness. The line producers, I'm going to give you the dirty secret of why, one of the hurdles we have with producers. When you're making a picture, one of the problems is you have to buy film first, right? So it's an early purchase. You rent the camera over the whole time. And so people say, okay, I'm going to do a 22-day shoot. And so you buy your film, and you usually map it out, and your film doesn't go much above or below your budget because you've got disciplined people and so forth. But with digital, it just keeps running, and it keeps running. And that 22 days becomes 23 days, 24 days, 25 days. And so you lose some discipline. And if you talk to particularly the deans of the film schools, they say that what the digital has lost is the discipline. It's lost the ability for filmmakers to understand light, but it's also lost the discipline associated with it. And so the other dirty secret of it is, once you've got, we used to call it in the can, done or nearly done, with film, you're done. With digital, you're still going, right? Post-production, some more post-production, and that's at the end of the budget. And so if you're a line producer, you go in and say, you can spend, for film or digital, you can spend, I'll throw a number out there, $100,000 for this thing. If you can, either way. But what happens is, you pay the film up front, but you pay the post-production in the end. And so if it's good enough, then they keep arguing, we just want a little bit more post-production, a little bit more, and it's always over budget. So if you talk to people, what's usually over budget? It's post-production. It's either length of shoot or post-production. It's very rarely on a film, we didn't buy enough film or we shot too long. So it's a pet peeve of mine in dealing, because I don't think it's a fair way to do it. So we're trying to be being analytical. We're trying to go out and get examples for communities like this of movies and here is how much film cost in this movie, and if they can do it, you should be able to do it too. So we'll get you some examples. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm a colorist working in Beirut, Lebanon, and I'm really working with the different cameras and the different formats, and I've had the privilege of being able to grade scanned film, both 35 and Super 16, on a number of occasions in the last few years, mostly for music videos. And just kind of giving feedback, if I'm showing somebody for a commercial or a film, 4 different looks, one of them is using some sort of film emulation LUT, and the others are maybe closer to the sort of raw camera color science. 90% of the time they prefer a filmic look. And what makes me curious about the phone, because you said, we have film emulation built into the phone, and then you mentioned again that you're interested in taking the immense knowledge that you have about color science and implementing that somehow, because people are desperate for that look. And while it is practical in some cases, ultimately, if you're shooting a commercial and you have to deliver the commercial in 3 days, sending it to a lab in LA or India, or even Dubai in the case of Beirut, doesn't always work for the schedule, but having that sort of trademark film look, let's say, or looks for the different film stocks. And I'm just wondering, is the end game ultimately like, we can't even tell that it's not shot on film? And I'm wondering, is that what's going to happen eventually? And then I think this also then connects to projection. Will digital projection sometimes come so close to film projection that it doesn't matter anymore? So
so there's no and by the way, if you look back at what digital was 5 years ago, I mean, they're doing a good job. As an industry, I think it's doing a good job. There's something visceral, now I'm going to get a little geeky on you, all right? So, all right. So we have no ideas how complex our brains are. The idea that we can drive and drink a Coca-Cola and listen to the radio and not crash in the car in front of us while on your texting is just amazing to me. But that's our brain. We're very sophisticated beings. We're not conscious of all the things going on there. And that is one of the things that, we have spent some time with neuroscientists and other to understand why so many people walk out of a movie watching film and feel refreshed and happy, and they walk out of a digital, the same movie, and they're kind of grouchy, even if the movie is the same movie. And so we've done studies where we have show film and digital, and we interview people afterwards, and we try and do it scientifically. And there's certain things. One is that you're getting so much digital projection that it's not differentiated. And it's multiplied by the screen time, obviously. The second one is film. Who's real geeky here? People know that every, 11 or 12 frames, there's a blank? Okay. So that was made so you could rest. So back when, I don't know I know Edison and Eastman kind of together made motion picture film. I don't know who came up with that idea or whether that came later after, but that over 2 hours, that's an amazing difference, and digital's just straight on. And when digital's doing it, remember, our brains are analog, we are analog, we can see the chemistry, that's, when we look at each other, we see analog. That digital is our brains somehow are taking those zeros and ones and the approximations and the incredible exaggerations, and I think it's exhausting us. And so I think that's part of the problem here. So are they going to get better? Yes. Is film going to get better? Yes. We're going to still do stuff, and we are helping because we're going to try and help with the science around people so they can emulate it and make it look better too. Sorry, long answer to that. Yeah, hi.
Hi, thank you for an amazing talk. I'm a travel blogger and I can't wait to buy the extra. I also work at Google in marketing, and I wanted to ask you from a marketing perspective, when it comes to Kodak's products and the Kodak brand, how do you strike the balance between nostalgia and technology? And another question was just about your plans for the Middle East.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'm working very closely with Hiroshi, who runs Android at Google, because that phone we announced is an Android phone, and he loved the idea that given your platform, I know it's a little bit different because Google also has their own phone, but they also own the Android platform, along with almost everything else in the world. But we've got a lot of help from your team around the fact that we've really differentiated a phone and used the Android platform on it. But your question was really about nostalgia versus technology and innovation, right? I guess.
Yeah, just the marketing of it. How do you strike that balance?
You can see I'm leaning nostalgia, right? Kodak is our differentiation, and my background was software and technology. I live in Silicon Valley, so I've never been in a company like Kodak that had this level of nostalgia. And I worked for HP, which has a lot, but it's not Kodak. And I've never been in one that differentiates through science and creation rather than innovation. And that's a very important distinction, because Silicon Valley is full of innovative companies. They do almost no science. And when I'm talking science, I mean synthetic chemicals, inventing new materials, inventing new manufacturing processes that bring those to market. And so, as such, we can't iterate like Google can, or other companies that are constantly innovating. When we make a scientific, when we're making a breakthrough, it's based on patents and intellectual property, and then 7 to 10 year cycles. And so, in our business, most of them, interestingly, have been around trying to make a lot of the chemicals we use safer for the environment. So that's kind of our innovation. So we because the brands are powerful, I am leaning probably 70, if I throw you a number, 70 into nostalgia and mapping that with the artistic side of our company, as opposed to the innovation or science that we're actually creating new things with. And I'm sorry, you had what last part was?
Plans for the Middle East?
Plans for the release?
Middle East for the
plans
region.
for the Middle East, yeah. So that's why I'm here. So we want to get projection back. So we want to work with the theaters here to try and at least show projection. We believe we can bring in very exciting filmmakers if we can get projection back. In terms of labs, Christian, do we have initiatives on labs?
We certainly looking into the options here, evaluating what we can set up with the release of the camera. We feel there's a great opportunity to bring the process back to the region, and also focus
And now she's obsessed with trying to kind of say, Mum, I want to shoot a film like they did in the film. So have you got any plans to kind of like go out into schools and do some sort of outreach for young kids that are obsessed?
So we do, and the pivotal part of that is the Super 8 camera. So that you really, it's very hard for us to promote film unless we can make it affordable for schools. So we'll have a special program where schools can buy the camera for significantly under cost and buy film for significantly under cost. And then we're also going to have a lot of promotion and contests that we think can get people shooting some real creative stuff. So I think we have someone from the Academy coming up next. So I am gonna, like in the Academy, the music comes, and so I'm gonna wrap up, and I'm around for the next day or so out here. So if I didn't get a chance to chat with you and you have some questions, you'll catch me out there. Thank you very much.